Next, we'll go into process validation. We'll continue our discussion into process validation guidance. So 21 CFR 2163. Equipment used in the manufacture, processing, packaging, or holding of a drug product shall be of appropriate design, adequate size, and suitability, located to facilitate operations for attendant use for its cleaning and maintenance. So this is going into the actual equipment. You need to make sure it's appropriately designed, adequate size. It can operate as intended, and it can be cleaned, and it can be maintained. So not only does your facility have to be in good, be appropriate, but also the equipment as well. So CFR 2011-68, facilities, equipment, automated equipment qualification. Automatic, mechanical, or electrical equipment, or other types of equipment, including computers or related systems that will perform a function satisfactorily, may be used in the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and holding of a drug product. If such equipment is so used, it shall be routinely calibrated, inspected, or checked according to a written program designed to assure proper performance. Written records of those calibration checks and inspections shall be maintained. So, with your equipment that you're using, you need to make sure that you have a maintenance plan in place, showing that it's been calibrated, inspected, checked within a specific time frame. And those checks need to be in written records and documented so that you can go back and check that, hey, this equipment was calibrated at this time, it was checked, or it was inspected. And that has to be on a frequency. So usually companies have a calibration department or maintenance department, and their task solely is to ensure that the calibration checks are done, it's documented, maintenance checks are done, it's documented, so that you stay in compliance with the regulations. Process. So going on, now we're talking about the guidance for industry process validations, general principles and practices published in January of 2011. So it's issued jointly by CDER, CBER, and CVM, and it's applicable to human and animal drugs and biological products, including active pharmaceutical ingredients. And this aligns with FDA guidance, including the FDA and the International Conference for Harmonization. So the process validation guidance, it aligns process validation activities with product lifecycle concept. So process design, and as your process is designed, you want to make sure your process is defined as well. With your process qualification, you want to make sure it's reproducible for commercial manufacturing. And then you want to have continued process verification. Why? Because you want to make sure that your process is in a state of control. Ultimately, that's what the FDA wants to see, that you are in a state of control. If for any reason they see that you're not in a state of control, that's when you have problems with the FDA. But as long as you can prove that, you're okay. So the process validation guidance document, it also aligns process validation activities with a product lifecycle concept. So it supports process improvement and innovation. We have new emphasis on it's on scientific rather than documented evidence. Statistical tools are needed, i.e. traditional rule of 3 batches is now currently being challenged. And your risk assessment is now integral to the validation process. So this is all types of things that are either being challenged or things needed to be done in order to support your process validation in your company. So the 2011 FDA process validation guidance covers the following categories of drugs. So it covers human drugs, veterinary drugs, biological and biotechnology products, finished products and APIs, and drug constituent of a combination. So drug and medical device products. So it covers if you're trying to validate anything from a human drug to veterinary drug, these principles covers all of those different categories. So we went over what it covers, but this is what it does not cover. Process validation guidance does not cover type A medicated articles and medicated feed, medical devices, dietary supplements, or human tissues intended for transportation regulated under Section 361 of the Public Health Service Act. So again, we went over what process validation covers. This is what it does not cover. So you can't apply the process validation guidelines to these specific types of products. So the guidance document does not discuss or specify validation of automated process control systems, i.e. computer hardware and software interfaces, which are commonly integrated into modern drug manufacturing equipment. So while software validation is exempt from its scope, it does mention that software may be an integral part of a manufacturing process. In many cases, software that operates a manufacturing line is a standalone process, deserving of its own requirements, specifications, validation, and the company should refer to the FDA's general principles of software validation. An off-the-shelf program that stores labeling, artwork, prints, or reconciles labels, has internal software processes that function independently of the equipment being monitored. This may warrant their own validation activity. So this is ultimately saying that a lot of times in companies, you have your equipment that operate, but a lot of the equipment that operates and works together to make the product is ran through an automated software. A lot of times they use Delta V, that you might use MES for your electronic records. So these things that control your process is often not covered in this process validation. It's only the equipment in your facility. The automation aspect of it, you ultimately have other guidelines you have to follow in order to prove that the automation part of your process is able to control your process satisfactorily. So a lot of times you'll go through a separate validation of your automation software in order for it to prove that it can work as intended, but it's separate from the process validation of your equipment or your manufacturing area. So guidance is relevant to the validation of processes that include automated equipment and processing. For example, your PLC or programmable logic controller that was coded specifically to operate a heat sealer is an integral part of that equipment. So in conclusion, determinations that software is or not integral to equipment design should be described in validation plans or risk assessment documents. It should include or reference 21 CFR Part 11 and electronic records as well. The guidance document does not specify what should be included as part of a regulatory submission. So this is just going on to what I was describing. In this example, your PLC that was coded to operate a heat sealer. You have to define in your process validation document or risk assessments whether this is part of your process validation or if it's covered separately under a different one. And you have to describe how that's going to be tested. So this is just more of an example of the automation and how it can or cannot be covered within the process validation. So general consideration of process validation. So you want to have an integrated team approach. You want to have support of senior management as necessary. You want to have studies planned and conducted according to sound scientific principles. And you want to have a degree of control over attributes and parameters that should be commensurate with their own risk to the process. So these are some general considerations that you want to consider for your process validation. So first, knowledge check question. Dietary supplements are covered by the guidance document. So we're not going to answer the question here. This is to get you thinking based on what we just covered. Are dietary supplements covered by the process validation guidance document? True or false?